we serve, especially when we're working in partnership with nonprofits like Made in Durham. I do want to note to my colleagues, this is a nonprofit we have served or offered the same type of grant to for over 10 years. So it is a singled out nonprofit organization that we are saying does really good work and that we want to continue to partner with. And I just want to highlight that in the conversation, the context with the summer camps, that we'll get into this position to do the same thing for other organizations similarly. But I do want to make sure that all of the organizations we work with keeps or creates a way to measure the demographics of those they serve, because they're missing. I don't know what the ages are, I don't know what the race is, I don't know what the gender is, and those are just basics that could be covered. And that's all. That was all.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I would say thank you for those comments, council member. Good questions there. I also want to say we see a lot of contracts at every work session. I just want to highlight the scope of work here for this grant is exemplary in terms of like what their objectives are, what the benchmarks are. So this is the kind of, I think this is kind of work and partners we want to work with that actually provide this kind of clarity on what they're intend to do and how they're going to measure that. So I want to thank Made in Durham for that.
10 years will make it clear.
Thank you. Welcome, and let's do it.
I'm sorry, I was just, Mayor and members of council, I was just the resource person for Made in Durham, and I wanted to stand in the event there was an actual question, but that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Madam Chief of Police, we will move to your presentation.
Good afternoon, Mayor Williams and my council. So I am wanting to just, Deputy Chief Melissa Bishop is going to be actually doing the presentation today. And so over the next series of quarterly reports, different members of my staff, specifically my deputy chiefs, will be providing those reports for you. And the purpose is that I am not the Durham Police Department. There are so many more amazing staff, men and women, that make the police department run. And it's important to me that you are able to meet a few of them, and because they are the ones that make this department run the way it should. So without further ado, I will introduce Deputy Chief Melissa Bishop. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to, before you introduced her, just a point of privilege in saying that I wanted to congratulate you on not just being the chief, but also continuing your efforts to improve yourself and others in your department around the Advanced Law Enforcement Certificate. And I noticed there's a lot of folks, so it looks like there's a lot of work happening behind the scenes to make sure that folks continue to elevate their skill sets. I just want to appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Deputy Chief Bishop is also an Academy mate of mine. So she will be retiring soon. And so she is our Deputy Chief over our administrative services. So that's that's kind of the backbone of the police department. So I'm going to bring her up to present the quarterly report. Thank you.
Deputy Chief, you are retiring soon?
I am.
Not
Haven't
accepted.
done the official date yet, but it's
Not accepted.
coming soon.
Doesn't matter. Not accepted.
All right. Well, good afternoon, Mr. Mayor Williams, council members, and Deputy City Manager Ferguson. As Chief mentioned, I'm Melissa Bishop, and today I will be presenting the first quarter report. This report covers our department's 5 performance measures: Part 1, violent crime; Part 1, property crime; clearance rates; response times for Property 1 calls and staffing levels, and I will also discuss some of the highlights for the first quarter. Our first slide is the Part 1 violent crime for January through March. Violent crime, which includes homicide, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault, increased by 3.7% in the first quarter of 2024 compared to 2023. This was driven primarily by an increase in robberies. Our homicide is down 53.9%. During the first quarter of 2024, we had 6 reportable homicide offenses, 6 criminal homicides, 1 was domestic related, 0 negligent manslaughter, and 0 justified homicides. Year to date, we are currently at 18. Forcible rape is down 20%. During the first quarter of 2024, we had 40 forcible rape offenses. 35% of the reported offenses occurred in prior years. Our robberies are up 18%. During the first quarter of 2024, we had 118 robbery offenses. 76% of the robberies were from persons, which shows an increase of 27%. 49% of the robberies from persons had one or more Hispanic victims. 24% of the robberies were commercial, and that has been unchanged. 86% of the commercial robberies involved retail businesses. 59% of total robberies involved the use of a firearm, also resulting in 3 gunshot wounds. Aggravated assault is up 5.5%. During the first quarter of 2024, we had 287 aggravated assaults from 191 incidents. 46% of the non-domestic incidents involved firearms, resulting in 28 gunshot wounds. 30% of the incidents were domestic, which is an increase in 23%. Next slide. This slide shows the chart of violent crime during the first quarter over a period of the last 10 years. While crime is variable, it is also seasonal, with the first quarter running from January to March, generally dominated by the winter months. Homicide, which is the blue line, were near the bottom of the range with 6 during the first quarter, less than half of last year's total. While rapes, the orange line, were down 20% from last year, they were still noticeably up from earlier years. This could still be a reporting effect influenced by our agency's SAKI grant and associated efforts to encourage and support victims. About 1 of every 3 rapes reported in 2024 occurred in prior years of 2012 to 2023. Robberies, the green line, have trended downward over the last few years, with the 3 lowest totals occurring during the last 4 years. About 1 of every robberies are commercial in nature, with the remaining 3/4 being individual robberies. Reductions have occurred in both categories. Hispanic victims have been disproportionately impacted, with 49% of the individual robberies in the first quarter having 1 or more such victims. Normally, we're around 39%. Aggravated assaults, the purple line, have remained relatively consistent over the last several years. Intimate partner domestic violence incidents were slightly more represented this year, with 30% of the total. Normally, we're at 28%. Incidents with firearms were less slightly represented, 46% versus 49%. Next slide. Our shooting incidents decreased by 34.1% in the first quarter of 2024 compared to 2023. The number of persons shot decreased by 16.7%. Most of the reduction was observed in the fatal category. There were 209 guns seized in 150 incidents in the first quarter of 2024, down 25.4% year over year. This graph takes a look at the trend for shootings over the last 3 years. While we saw a spike in shooting incidents last year, the number of persons shot has trended downward each year. We do post these shooting graphs on a weekly basis on our website to keep the community informed on the number of shooting incidents and persons shot. Next slide. So now we'll move into property crime for Part 1, property crime of January through March. Property crime, which includes burglary, larceny, and motor vehicle theft, increased by 15.6% in the first quarter of 2024 compared to 2023. This was driven primarily by the continued increase in motor vehicle thefts and larcenies from motor vehicles. Burglaries showed a reduction of 0.3%. During the first quarter of 2024, we had 315 burglary offenses. 58% of the burglaries were to residential locations, which is a reduction of 6%. 13% of burglaries were to retail business locations, which is an increase of 1%. And 16% of burglaries to construction sites, a significant increase from 2023. Household goods outpaced power and hand tools, which significantly led last year at a 2-to-1 ratio. Larcenies are up 12%. During the first quarter of 2024, we had 1,904 larceny offenses. 40% of the larcenies were from motor vehicles, which is an increase of 26%. 72% of all stolen guns came from motor vehicles. 25% of the vehicles with a gun stolen were unlocked. 36% of larcenies were related to shoplifting, which is an increase of 14%. Tools were the most common type of property stolen. Our motor vehicle thefts had an increase of 53.2%. 80% of the vehicles stolen, not including attempts or vehicles not registered, have been recovered. 18% of the vehicles stolen were left running unattended or had the keys left somewhere in the vehicle. Kias were the most frequently stolen vehicle make, totaling 91, followed by Hyundais, totaling 90, and then Hondas and Toyotas at 28. 22% of the motor vehicle theft incidents were attempts, heavily impacted these manufacturers. This continues a national trend that started in 2022 and has increased in Durham around April of 2023. Next slide. This chart shows the property crimes during the first quarter over the last 10 years. Burglaries, the blue line, have trended significantly downward over the last 10 years, with the three lowest totals occurring during the last 3 years. While residential burglaries are slightly lower than average, 58% of the total versus 61%, and burglaries to businesses are down even more, 13% versus 18%. Burglaries to construction sites with appliances being targeted after installation were abnormally high during the first quarter. Household items were the most frequently stolen item, which is usually led easily by tools. Larcenies, the orange line, have trended up over the last 2 years. After being down for 2 years from its peak in 2020, during the first quarter, 40% of all larcenies were from motor vehicles or involved parts or accessories. Normally, we're around 30%. Of all guns stolen this year, 72% were from this category, which is much higher than normal, which is at 52%. In addition, breaking the glass was the method of entry for 56% of the guns stolen from these motor vehicles, more than 4 times the normal rate of 13%. Motor vehicle thefts, the green line, have significantly increased over the last 2 years. While they are down 22% from the peak experienced during the second and third quarters of last year, they are still up 53% over the first quarter of 2023. As noted before, Kias and Hyundais continue to dominate the vehicles stolen, which is a regional and national trend. Attempts to steal these vehicles also contribute to crime counts, which constituted 22% of all motor vehicle theft offenses in the first quarter, compared to 4% normally. This is a chart of our Part 1 clearance rates. A clearance rate is calculated by dividing the number of offenses cleared in the period by the number of offenses reported for the same period. It is not uncommon for an offense occurring in one period to be cleared in another period, such as in a cold case homicide or sexual assault. FBI clearance data for 2022 is based on the South region, regardless of jurisdiction's population. Data for 2023 is not available yet. Clearance rates for the first quarter of 2024 were higher than the normal. DPD's clearance rates were higher than the normal FBI annual data for 2022 in aggravated assault and burglary, and better than the DPD annual data for 2023 in all categories other than homicide and rape. While the homicide clearance rate was lower than 2023, it is based on a very small number of offenses, 6, which can be very highly variable. The rape clearance was significantly lower than DPD's annual data for 2023 and FBI 2022 for the South region of the country. 87% of the violent crime cases cleared were via an arrest, either by our agency or another agency serving our warrants. 13% were exceptionally cleared, meaning there was significant evidence to support an arrest, but some element beyond the control of law enforcement prevented it from occurring. Valid exceptions include the victim is unwilling to cooperate, the prosecution of the case is declined by the district attorney's office, a juvenile offender not in custody, and death of the offender. 95% of the property crimes cleared were via arrests and 5% via an exception. Our priority one calls for service for January to March. There were 2,153 priority one calls for service in the first quarter of 2024, which was unchanged from 2023. Our average response time was 6 minutes and 37 seconds, which did not meet the target of 5 minutes and 48 seconds. We answered 49% of these calls in less than 5 minutes, which did not meet our target of 57%. So staffing at the end of the first quarter. Our sworn staffing was at 75% at the end of March 2024. It is currently at 74% staffed, 26% vacant. We currently have 397 filled positions out of the 535 authorized positions. This includes 29 recruits in some phase of training. Our non-sworn staffing was at 86% at the end of March 2024. Non-sworn staffing is currently the same as it was at the end of first quarter. We had 8 new officers graduate from our basic law enforcement training, also known as BLET, Academy number 58 in February. We currently have 12 recruits going through Academy number 59. We are working to recruit for Academy number 60 that will begin on August 26. There are currently 9 recruits who have been confirmed for this academy. Based on current projections, recruiting unit is projecting a class size of approximately 20. In the first quarter, we had 53 applicants, which is around the same amount of applicants we had in the first quarter of last year. The number of applicants in the first quarter last year was the highest that we have seen since 2018. During the first quarter of 2024, our recruiting unit initiated multiple marketing campaigns for recruitment, which included the Coffee Shops and Local Business Initiative. Through this initiative, our recruiters met with local businesses and hung up recruiting flyers in these establishments. We are also currently working to schedule a recruiting and information symposium with the North Carolina Congress of Latino Organizations. The recruiting unit is also part of a DocuSign pilot program for the city of Durham. This program enables the applicants to submit their applications prior to testing to make the process move along smoother. We're also researching some new software known as eSoft to streamline the background phase. We have also been approved for a COPS 30 by 30 grant to help with our female recruiting, and we'll talk more about that on the next slide. Our 30 by 30 initiative. We continue to build up our representation of female officers as we are a member of this initiative. The 30 by 30 initiative is a coalition of police leaders, researchers, and professional organizations who have joined together to advance the representation of women in all ranks of policing across the United States. The goal is to increase the representation of women in police recruits class to 30 by 2030. At the end of the first quarter, we had 70 sworn female officers out of 402. 17.3% of the Durham Police sworn officers are female, which is above the national average of 12%. Currently, we have 66 sworn female officers out of 397, which equals 16.6% of the Durham police officer sworn officers. In the first quarter of 2024, we had a total of 16 female applicants apply to become sworn police officers. That's the most female applicants we have seen since 2018. We had 1 female graduate in Academy 58 in February of this year, and currently we have 2 females that are in our Academy 59. The reasons vary for why the applicants are not making it to the Academy. Those reasons include failing the physical or written tests, failing some of the background checks, or they withdraw from the process. These are also the same reasons why their male counterparts don't make it through the academy too. Our recruiting unit works year-round to recruit more female officers. Recruiters make efforts to attend female college career fairs, such as the Meredith College in Raleigh. In 2023, our public affairs unit featured a different female officer each month through the Women in Blue video series to help boost interest among female applicants. We have also been approved, as mentioned, for the 30 by 30 grant. Funds from this grant are geared toward initiating more specific recruitment for female officers. We are currently working on holding 2 events. One is a hiring event for female officers, and the second is focused on retaining our current DPD female officers. Both events are tentatively scheduled for the fall of 2024. We are in the planning stages, and more information will be provided in the future. Our U visa requests by the quarter. During the months of January through March 2024, the Durham Police Department received 83 U visa requests. 51 of the U visas were approved and 32 were denied, resulting in 61% of the results submitted this quarter were approved. We currently do not have a backlog of U visa requests, and we are processing requests as they come in. And please make sure to follow us on social media platforms. And that is the end of the presentation. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you so much. Any questions before you leave?
I would just thank you for the presentation. You did a great job.
Thank you.
And just say that the one thing that's kind of always a sticking point for me is the vacancies and just being mindful that we've got to figure out something. But I'll definitely come back to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Councilmember Freeman.
Or has that not previously been used as a metric?
I would, well, first I'd defer to the manager to speak to her philosophy, but I would say that no, primarily our staffing level is going to be driven, our recommendations are going to be driven by workload. And we're going to set that at the number of staff that we think would be necessary to achieve acceptable outcomes. And then based on that, that's the target we want to hit. And if we are not able to hire that many people, I think we are still going to maintain all of our efforts to try and fill those vacancies so that we're pegging the number of FTEs at the service demand.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it just seems to me, and I'm not, I'm not trying to be any kind of way, but I hear the recruit numbers and then the numbers of folks who are making it through those recruit teams. And I'm seeing so, we throw around like percentages, but this is a large number of vacancies to fill, and we're not going to hit that unless we start having police sort of growing. I don't think we're going to hit that from what y'all are saying about the numbers of folks coming through the recruit class. And I want to say specifically that I do appreciate that Durham has really high standards for our police officers. I think that's a great statement to the program that the chief has run, and I'm excited to see the diversity. But I also am just being realistic about these numbers, and so it's just something I'm thinking about moving forward in terms of calculating that. But I appreciate those answers. Thank you.
There was a pretty massive increase in the motor vehicle theft. Obviously, that's happening around the country. Can you just give us a little bit of insight as to why that's happening?
I mean, there have been, like TikTok has shown videos of how to steal vehicles, and they are being shared, and the juveniles are watching it, so it's kind of leading. So that would probably be a big.
We really think it's
Yeah, it's a national trend that is
the social media.
covered, and the social media is picking up on it.
And then can you also just touch on the homicide and rape clearance rates and why those are a little bit down in the first quarter, why we might see that just according to those statistics?
So this one, the biggest one is because the first quarter for homicides, we only had 6. So with the clearance rate just being with the number being so small, 6, and a clearance rate, then it's just going to show a difference. Now for the rapes, we spoke with investigators, and we really could not pinpoint an exact reason as to why the numbers were lower. Some of the investigators did look at the cases, and there was a little bit of a lack of cooperation from the victim. There are services that we encourage for people to report so they can get those services, and a police report is needed for that. However, that could be a possibility as to why that in order for them to get certain services, a police report is required, but then they don't want to participate any further in the investigation.
Thank you. Yeah, and I know that those are a challenge across the country as well.
Yes.
What would it take to get closer, even if we don't meet it, but get closer to meeting our target response times?
Higher pay to increase our staffing, because there is a trend that police officers are coming back. They're from 2020. It's starting to take a pick up. However, officers are looking for higher pay, support from leadership.
And then my last question, I was looking at the U visa graphic. There's a very large number of applications, and you already touched on this a little bit. It's also the largest number of denials that we've seen, at least since 2021. Can you just tell me a little bit about what's behind that?
So I'm not sure what can answer on why there was an increase. I do know that a lot of times we have people that apply for a U visa, but they must be a direct victim of the crime. So they may not have been may have been a witness or an associate. And so since they weren't the victim of the crime, we do not give them the U visa. We will refer them to the DA's office for that. So that could be a possible. And there's also, Captain Packard is sharing with me that he handles the U visas, that there was a lack of cooperation from when he follows up to see on the investigation. because they also must cooperate with the investigation.
Okay, yeah, the applicants.
The
of
applicants
visa.
must
Yeah.
cooperate with the investigators. If there's a lack of cooperation, then we will not approve a U visa.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Deputy Chief Bishop, I have a couple. You said a statistic about robbery victims of Latino ethnicity, and you gave the percentage, and it was a lot higher. So I just wanted to hear that again.
For the robberies, was it?
I thought it was robberies, maybe. It was like 49% of robbery victims in Q1 were Latino, but I wasn't sure if
Right.
in
You're correct.
comparison to what was I missed the
Normally 39%.
39. Can we, so historically, one of our worst periods is usually around the holidays. And so this would have been post the holidays. So just curious as to what any thought or hypothesis as to maybe why we didn't see that number come down. Because usually we do see it. It's a terrible cycle. We all are aware of it. I've spoken about it before. So
Right.
just curious if y'all had any thoughts around that.
Some of the information that was given was basically, there is some trends that they were looking at, that investigators, and they are kind of involving some juveniles.
Okay.
So it's still kind of under investigation and looking at different things, but there wasn't a driving force
Okay.
of it.
Whereas, like, I think sometimes we know the time of year is often the driving force, right?
Right.
So this is why I'm like, well, this doesn't make any
Right.
sense to me.
And-
Like, usually this is post-holidays. As we can see on the numbers in general, our first quarter often tends to be one of our quietest quarters. I'm not looking forward to our next quarter. And so I was just curious, but that makes sense. And then are we seeing an increase of, and I'm seeing it some, but I'm not seeing a huge increase. Are we seeing an increase of Latino perpetrators? Because historically, they have been victims and not perpetrators. And I'm just wondering, especially around Latino youth, if we're seeing an uptick, if that's being tracked, which to me then, I mean, what has historically happened in other cities is as immigrant communities become more established, you will see growing gang activity within that community. And that's something that we haven't seen historically in Durham. And so I'm always cognizant of if that trend is starting to shift.
I would have to follow up with our investigations unit on that one to look, but it would be something that we could track. Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
if we could start, I would appreciate if you all are seeing a trend within, especially youth, and I would say under 25, perpetrators of crime and their ethnicity, and if we're seeing an increase within Latino populations. Because I certainly hear anecdotally, right? From parents that are concerned about their kids getting involved in things that they don't want them to be involved in. And so that's just a personal interest of mine. And then how are you all thinking? So it doesn't really affect you because we don't run the jail, but with the recent potential enforcement, by the state at the jail with the sheriff having to cooperate with ICE, how are we thinking we're going to handle that on the PD side? To your point around people not wanting to report crimes with U visas, domestic violence cases, potentially rape cases, when we tie immigration into that, folks not necessarily wanting to participate or just in general trust within police officers eroding because we're bringing their immigration status in. So I was just curious if y'all are having those conversations. What is the potential strategy? And again, you don't have to answer that today, but I would appreciate some kind of response as to what we're thinking as a police department.
Yeah, and the police department and the sheriff's department are always collaborating. So those, I'm sure, I have not been part of that, but that's not on my side of the department. But they have been working with the jails, and we will continue to make sure those conversations continue.
Yeah, I just am very concerned around, we've worked really hard in Durham, and your department, the police department has worked really, really hard to increase trust within our immigrant communities to report crimes. And these kinds of bills really just erode that trust. Because no one's going to cooperate if they think somebody's immigration status is in jeopardy. So I need our police officers to really be mindful, and as always, whatever y'all need from engagement side, happy to do it, but we need folks to feel like they can. As we see, they are often, our Latino neighbors and often immigrant neighbors are victims of crime at a higher level, and that makes everybody less safe. Because if they're not going to report it, then the community as a whole becomes less safe. So really wanting to see that we're going to have a good, robust response depending on what's happening at the state level around this law change. And then finally, I have one more question. Are y'all working, like when you all are getting a U visa petition, the city runs an immigrant legal defense fund with Justice Matters, we fund that. So what is the coordination between the police department and Justice Matter and referring those folks? Because often you do need an immigration attorney to help you with that paperwork. And so if we're having, with folks who are, U visa recipients, that they can then go and get those free legal services to get
Right.
them on that path of documentation.
Right. And for our purposes, they don't need an attorney to get the first part of the U visa, the next step. So, we always refer them to, if they need a referral. However, when they come to us just to get the U visa first step of the paperwork, we do not require an attorney.
Yeah, I know that. I'm saying that then you have to go, the next step is.
Right, if they need assistance, a lot of
Yeah.
times we get them already from an attorney.
Oh, perfect.
So
Okay.
if they were, that is something that we could refer them for.
Okay, so I guess my ask is also then ensuring that we have a good and tight relationship with Justice Matters, which is the nonprofit that we fund.
Okay,
Specifically
absolutely.
for that.
Yes,
Thank you. Those are all my questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Rist?
Thank you, Deputy Chief Bishop, for the presentation. I just have one question following on my colleague, Councilmember Baker's questions about motor vehicle theft. So I understand that this social media phenomenon that's sort of providing ways or sort of guides on how to steal cars is out there. My question is, sorry, let me get back to the screen I was looking at. Our clearance rates for motor vehicle thefts are much lower. I mean, it's a national phenomenon, right? But our clearance rates are much lower than the FBI rate. So what's up with that?
A lot of ours is, deals with some of the staffing issues that we're faced with, is just that the caseload that they have is also a prime factor of it, and cooperation from the victims.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to say one last thing. I know that this council is very committed, and I hope our police officers are watching what's happening with pay and are seeing the very substantive increases that will be hitting everyone's, knock on wood, budget goes smoothly, everyone's paychecks and, their first two paychecks in July, and that we responded to what we heard in the police department around anniversary hiring, moving everyone to July versus anniversary hiring because of that confusion. So this is just to our police department. Your council is hearing you loud and clear. You all have been coming to us around the pay issue for a long time. So yes, Councilmember Cook, I definitely agree with you around the vacancies, but I am hoping that at least some of it, maybe not all of it, will get solved with the large pay increases that our police officers will be seeing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, great point, yeah, exactly.
She's looking at my notes. That's why she said that. Anyway, thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation. Obviously, this report, while if it's one person shot, it's too many. But this report is much easier to digest than what we have coming. So I'm going to ask my questions about this report because I know what's coming. Okay. All right. So I'd like to go a little deeper. If you're looking at this at the high level that we have, for example, shooting incidents, we're at 147. This first quarter versus 223 last quarter. 40 people shot, 5 fatal, 35 non-fatal. Now, I know that's going to change. What I don't see here, which I'd like to see, is where these are happening, the demographic of who's being shot and who's shooting, and how many shots were fired. Do we have that information at all?
We do have it. Oh, okay.
Sorry to interrupt. Patrice Andrews again. So how we determine how many shots are actually fired is by the number of casings that we collect, because that's something we can put our hands on and say there was, at one point in time, there was a bullet in this casing. We, thus far, year to date, we've collected 1,500, a little over 1,500 casings. So we know whether it was a fatal or non-fatal shooting, that was the number of rounds collectively that we know had been fired, that we actually collected a casing on. Last year it was a little bit higher last year, just over 2,050 maybe, 2,000 and some casings that were actually collected last year, same time, so.
Do we know how many calls? I mean, so this is, I guess, we'll be working with Duke Health that's our hospital in this area. How many folks are of these non-fatal and sometimes fatal, as we know, based on our reports from the manager, are reporting to the emergency rooms without a corresponding 911 call? Do we know that information?
We can pull that information. We have seen a lot more people driving themselves or being driven to the emergency room, because obviously the emergency room the ED does notify us. But we have seen more people being driven and dropped off, than traditionally.
Do we know why folks are not calling 911?
Well, I can't say that they're not calling, that someone isn't calling 911. I know sometimes in situations where it's a drive and drop off, it could be anything from not wanting us to find the actual location of where it happened, and which we have in times been able to backtrack, and it's been different from what the witnesses or victim in the car has said. We think that's purposeful, or it's for them the fastest way to get that person to the ED and getting them treated, or the actual shooting occurred from car to car or from outside into the car.
But we are able to track whether these shooting incidents have corresponding calls or not.
Correct.
Yeah.
We can track that.
All right. Do we have a percentage of who's being shot and who's doing the shooting?
Not
Just
as far
generally.
as, demographics. I can get you an exact percentage. We can get a percentage of perpetrators. I think Mr. Sheese might have.
So Mr. Sheese, who's our analytical division manager, he stated that the demographics are on the website, so you can see the breakdown. But we can't get that for you. We just don't have it off the top of our heads right now.
Okay. I'm going to just assume that it's majority young black men.
Yes.
Gotcha. So I know that you all do some type of follow-up. Actually, I've heard reviews from family members of individuals who've been shot and killed and individuals who've been shot and survived, that the police follow up. The counseling is really good. And I think that we're going to get some resources around survivor care. Well, I hope we do, because I'm personally interested in a full apparatus of, just public safety support and family support. I think about all the trauma that, the kids getting off the bus, the fact that kids can get off the bus and see shootings happening while they're just walking to their door, and they don't even flinch. It's just normal. I can't digest that. It is just, it's sort of, that we almost touched on it when I think Councilmember Cook earlier was talking about, just because it's affordable housing or lower cost housing, you shouldn't have to be just stuck in one area. So I hope that we just totally demolish, isolated, humans don't deserve to live in some of the properties they're living in the city. And I know that DHA's plan moving forward is to have mixed income, mixed use to ensure that, access to nice amenities is equitable and equal in a sense. But what reality we have right now is I'm asking these questions because I'm getting a lot of, folks reaching out to me that I can't respond to them. I can't answer, and I've been in a really good mood until I have to talk about this stuff, and colleagues, I got to say to us, we did a really good job at figuring out why we couldn't keep ShotSpotter, but we don't have a real response to it. And neighborhoods are getting sprayed. They're getting sprayed. I mean, people, and matter of fact, let me put another question on the record. We talked about it briefly, but another data point I want to start saying in these presentations is the shelling, per site. I believe there was just recently 50-some shots in McDougal. The week before, I think it was like 100 and something, or nearly 190 or whatever. We're going to have to respond somehow, some way. And the Office of Survivor Care is something I hope we get, but it damn sure can't be the only thing. There are folks right now watching this video, and they're constantly saying, hey, what are we going to do about it? This is a customer service issue, and we have the model of how to actually activate as a community as well as a council. And as I said recently, I want to say this on the public record, a ceasefire in Gaza and a ceasefire in Durham, that's not a binary. It's a both and. But we shut City Hall down for one, and we're quiet here in Durham. And personally, I'm offended by that. So we're going to have some serious conversations on who we're listening to, how sensitive we want to be. I grew up in these type of neighborhoods. I don't live in those neighborhoods now. So I can't pretend to know the daily experience or lived experience of the folks that are living in the neighborhoods that are dodging bullets constantly. But I also refuse to let it be a normality. Recently, I went to the bus station at the last work session we had when there was a shooting going on at the bus station while we were sitting in here. When I left here, I went over to the bus station because I wanted our bus drivers to know that, hey, I hear you. I'm not afraid to come out here. I want to let you know that we heard about it, and I'm here for you. I also spoke to the police officer that was working off duty, but I also went and talked to the 20 young fellas that was sitting on the wall. And I said, get your bleep off the wall and get on a bus or go home somewhere. I promise you I can make one call and there's going to be a lot of people coming down that street right there that's going to get you out of here. And they dispersed. And I told them, you're not going to make our bus terminal a territory. You're just not. But that is what's happening. And I can only imagine the strain and stress that you all have being so short with your staffing issue. So I'm excited about the pay that hopefully will come. We pass the budget. But I think it's going to take a lot more. And I think what's invaluable when it comes to actually getting people to want to work for you or work in your organization is how you actually invest your support. And we've done a good job at stating what's important to us, and we've done a good job at being quiet. When we have actual people that are living in these situations asking us, and I'm talking about people who don't know how to sign up to come to the council meetings, but they're asking us. Facebook Messenger, Instagram, DM, TikTok DM, everywhere. What are y'all gonna do? We need to do something about this crime. That's the number one issue that I hear out in the community. It was also corresponding consistently with the number one resident response on the resident survey. So we need sidewalks, we need bike lanes, we need street repair. We need all of those things. But we also have to acknowledge the customer service issue, almost crisis that we have on our hands. When someone says, how do y'all do a bond on street sidewalks and street safety? And we're getting shot at. And nothing is happening. So, colleagues, I told some of you all I would mention this today, and this is why, because there are folks watching, there are folks that have a high expectation, not even a high expectation, they just have a normal resident expectation. I don't want to get shot at, and that's just from residents. It's also from the young men that I sat on a panel with yesterday at my Brother's Keeper Summit. It said, you know, when the moderator said, "What is most important to you?" And he's like, "Yo, bro, I'm just tired of looking over my shoulder. You don't know what direction the bullet's coming from." They just don't want to look over their shoulder. That's it. They should be able to say, "I don't know, you know, I don't know what college I want to go to, or I don't know what job I want to get, but, you know, I have these options." No, they just want to not have to look over their shoulder because of the bullets that are coming. So, of course, it's personal because I'm a Black male. And if you just simply anecdotally follow the news reports, they all look like me. So I hope that we could really, really assess our priorities. I really do, because this is on us. We can't push this on anything else. Police officers, police department, thank you for doing your job. Thanks for doing it well. Because when you go to Wake Forest, it doesn't feel like this. They have all the lights on. Every officer has an SUV, and they pull up. If you just cross the lane wrong, you go to Wake Forest. There's 5 vehicles coming at night, in the middle of the night. I've been pulled over 3 times in Wake Forest. Imagine my fear. So thank you for not being that way in Durham, but unfortunately, you probably don't have time. So I'm talking a lot, but to the community members that are watching, I hear you, I feel you. It is personal, it's serious, and I think this is the biggest crisis that we're dealing with right now. And it's one of the main things, if not, actually, it's the main thing we're not even responding to. So those are my comments. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
And I've jumped all over the agenda and I have no idea where we are. All right,
If you're doing pulled items, number 12, if you're doing precinct.